Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. Sunlight seeps through the blinds in thin, hesitant lines, painting soft gold across the floor. Nothing is wrong. You're not in danger. The bills are paid. The fridge hums steadily, full. Your phone rests beside you, buzzing now and then with texts from people who say they care. And yet, there's a void inside you, a hollow weight pressing against your chest as though gravity has deepened just for you. You try to name it: boredom, fatigue, a kind of ambient sadness, but that doesn't capture it. It's not sharp like grief, not fleeting like disappointment. It's heavier, slower. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't burn, it suffocates. You find yourself staring at walls, not because you're fascinated by their texture, but because your mind has lost the thread of desire. Nothing compels you. Even joy has lost its scent. The world continues spinning, but you no longer feel tethered to it. Now, here's the paradox. From the outside, you look fine. You might even smile when prompted, laugh at the right cues, and say, "I'm just tired," when asked. But inside, you are unraveling, and no one sees it. Not even you. Not completely. What do you call that? We've been taught that depression is just sadness that overstayed its welcome, a gloomy cousin to sorrow, nothing more. We believe it's simply an emotion, a mood, something you can shake off with the right distraction or a morning jog. But what if that's a lie? What if depression isn't an emotion at all, but an existential response to a deeper, more insidious fracture? What if depression is what happens when your soul refuses to live a life that no longer feels like yours? Think of the irony. We live in a world more connected than ever, yet millions walk the earth feeling isolated in crowds, unheard in conversations, invisible in daylight. People scroll through feeds filled with manicured happiness, while secretly wondering why they feel nothing. Suicide rates rise in affluent cities. Celebrities with fame and fortune whisper about emptiness before vanishing from headlines, and sometimes from life itself. And society shrugs, offering platitudes like mental health matters, while selling you 10 tips to boost serotonin. But what if the truth is more disturbing? What if depression isn't a disease to be cured, but a signal that something is deeply, fundamentally misaligned, not just in the individual, but in the culture itself? Can you imagine that? That your numbness, your apathy, your desire to curl inward and disappear is not weakness, but rebellion. Rebellion against a world that asks you to perform instead of feel, to compete instead of connect, to chase instead of contemplate, to wear a smile like armor while your inner world crumbles quietly, unseen. Here's the deeper question. If depression isn't just sadness, then what is it? And what if trying to fix it with surface-level treatments is like mopping up water while the pipe beneath your home continues to leak? Relentlessly, invisibly. How do we name a condition that has no single face, that manifests as exhaustion in one person and irritability in another, that masquerades as productivity, perfectionism, or even kindness? A condition that isn't always marked by tears, but by a silent internal scream that echoes through the corridors of the mind. Philosophers once spoke of the quiet desperation of modern life. Schopenhauer saw life itself as suffering, camouflaged by illusion. Nietzsche warned of the soul's slow decay under the weight of conformity, and Viktor Frankl, peering through the lens of unimaginable suffering, said meaning, not happiness, is what keeps a man alive. So what happens when meaning erodes, when the story you've been living no longer holds you? You begin to drift, not toward madness, but toward a dangerous kind of clarity. You see the hollowness in the rituals you perform. The smile you wear becomes a mask you forget how to remove. You become both actor and audience in a theater of detachment. And still, you look fine. Here's the question that claws beneath the skin. What if the real danger isn't depression itself, but the world that makes it inevitable? You've probably felt it or known someone who has. That creeping sense that something is off, that the things you once loved feel distant, that you're chasing goals that no longer matter, or worse, never did. This is not just an emotional crisis, this is spiritual dissonance, a philosophical fracture, a psychic scream muffled by noise and social expectations. So what now? What if everything you've been told about depression has missed the point? What if understanding it requires diving not just into medicine or psychology, but into the very architecture of modern consciousness? Into the stories we live by, the identities we cling to, the values we inherit without question. You feel that pressure behind your eyes, that stirring in your gut. That's not sadness, that's a question breaking through. Something inside you is asking to be heard, and to listen, you must go deeper. Depression is not merely the presence of pain, it is often the absence of meaning. You feel lost, but not in the way one loses their keys. You're lost in your own skin, drifting in the quiet abyss between supposed to and want to. And here's the truth no one dares say. The world you were born into may be engineered not for human fulfillment, but for human function. You were never asked what your soul needed, only what you could produce, perform, or perfect. How did we get here? To find the roots of this silent epidemic, we have to descend below the surface, past the Instagram reels, the wellness slogans, the prescription bottles lined like soldiers on a nightstand. Depression doesn't originate in the brain alone. Its tendrils stretch into the psyche, into history, into culture. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But society rarely offers that invitation. From childhood, you are conditioned not to know yourself, but to be known through grades, likes, promotions, accolades. You are trained to become palatable, acceptable, marketable. In that process, something ancient and irreplaceable is exiled, your inner truth. The world doesn't reward truth, it rewards consistency, compliance, and charisma. A child who asks too many existential questions is labeled sensitive. A teenager who retreats inward is told to get out more. An adult who questions the system is deemed unmotivated or depressed. But what if the child was intuitive, the teen introspective, the adult awake? Think of the metaphor Jung used for the psyche, a vast, dark forest where the ego is only a flickering lantern. In that forest, depression is not the predator, it is the guide. It's the part of you screaming, "This path isn't yours." But instead of following it deeper, we panic. We medicate the voice. We drown it in caffeine and content. We call it a disorder, something broken to be fixed. Enter Friedrich Nietzsche. He believed that depression, what he called existential sickness, was often the byproduct of confronting the void, the meaninglessness that arises when traditional values collapse. In his famous declaration that God is dead, Nietzsche wasn't celebrating atheism. He was warning us. Without transcendent meaning, modern life becomes a hollow stage play where the actors have forgotten the script. And hasn't that come true? In a world ruled by algorithms and bottom lines, what place is left for the soul? Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism, believed that humans are condemned to be free, that in the absence of objective meaning, we are forced to construct it ourselves. But freedom, when unaccompanied by direction, breeds terror. Depression may then be the paralysis of a spirit left alone in the maze of choice, without a compass of purpose. Consider Viktor Frankl, who endured the hell of Auschwitz and still emerged with a luminous insight. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. But the modern world doesn't give you a why. It gives you options, distractions, comforts. It offers 50 brands of cereal and 1,000 career paths, but starves you of existential anchoring, and so depression seeps in. Not as a storm, but as a slow unraveling. You go through the motions, smile for the camera, fulfill your duties, but inside something erodes, not suddenly, but steadily. Schopenhauer, perhaps the most brutally honest of them all, described human life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. For him, happiness was not the default, it was the anomaly. In his view, our constant striving, our inability to rest in the present moment, made suffering inevitable. He may have been right, partially, but perhaps there's another dimension. Maybe depression arises when we stop striving for what is real and instead strive for what is expected. This is where the hidden problem takes shape, not as a chemical imbalance, but as a soul imbalance, a misalignment between your inner world and the outer script you've been forced to read from. Aldous Huxley once predicted a future where people would be enslaved not by force but by pleasure, numbed into docility by comfort, noise, and endless distraction. Sound familiar? In such a world, depression isn't an anomaly. It's a whisper of the sacred in a world of noise. We treat it like a glitch. But what if it's a messenger? What if your depression is not telling you that you're malfunctioning, but that something fundamental is broken in the way we live? That we were never meant to measure our worth in likes and salaries. That we were never meant to live in boxes, stare at screens, and silence the primal ache for real connection, ritual, meaning. Because here's what's really happening beneath the surface. We're spiritually starved. In a culture that has abandoned myth, degraded philosophy, and turned religion into branding or bureaucracy, there is a vacuum. And depression rushes in, not as punishment but as signal. It is the soul's grief for a life unlived. But how do you grieve something you were never allowed to know you lost? And so we return to that quiet room where the light bends across the floor and nothing is wrong, except everything. Depression is not always visible. It wears many masks: ambition, detachment, overthinking, sarcasm, isolation, even success. It whispers, "This isn't it," but in a language few recognize. Still, it is speaking. And if you listen closely, beyond the fog of diagnoses and daily duties, you may hear the real question echoing through the silence. What if your depression is not the end of your story, but the beginning of your awakening? The path forward isn't easy. It requires you to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about yourself, but about the world you've inherited. The question isn't, how do I fix myself, but what has been done to me, and more importantly, what can I reclaim? To answer that, we must now turn to the consequences of not listening, to what happens when depression is left unseen, unspoken, untreated at the level of the soul. You don't notice the rot at first. It doesn't announce itself with alarm bells or headlines. It doesn't scream for help. Instead, it creeps in slowly, quietly reshaping the contours of your life. a missed phone call here, a canceled plan there, a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. The laugh that used to come easily now feels like a performance. You catch yourself staring out the window, not at anything in particular, but into a strange and aching void. And still, you go to work. Still, you reply with, "I'm fine," because the world has trained you not just to hide pain, but to be ashamed of it, to treat it as a defect, a personal failing. But depression, when misunderstood, doesn't just hurt, it deforms. Over time, it alters your perception of reality itself. You begin to filter everything through the lens of futility. Opportunities don't feel exciting, they feel exhausting. Conversations feel hollow. Your inner monologue becomes a constant critic, dissecting every thought, questioning every action, dragging every small joy back into the mud. You begin to doubt your instincts. You stop trusting your voice. And here's the most dangerous part. The longer it goes unacknowledged, the more you forget what life felt like without it. The fog becomes the new atmosphere. You stop trying to leave the cave because you've forgotten there was ever a sun. This is the unseen consequence of depression. Not just sadness, but psychic amnesia. You forget who you were before the numbness set in. But it doesn't stop at the individual. Depression is not a solitary illness. It's contagious in a way that defies biology. When enough people start living in that fog, it becomes cultural weather, a shared silence, a mutual performance of normal. People smile through the hollowness, scroll through curated feeds of other people's pretend lives, and wonder why they're the only ones who feel nothing. And this shared lie feeds itself. Think about the modern workplace. Hyper-efficient, always on, obsessed with productivity. There's no room for inner turmoil. Burnout is a badge of honor. Overachievement masks emptiness. You're applauded for pulling 70-hour weeks, even if your soul is crawling toward collapse. Ask yourself, what kind of society rewards a person most when they are least connected to themselves? And the irony, many of those suffering the most are the ones who seem the strongest, the high-functioning depressive, the empathetic friend, the reliable professional, the parent who shows up every day. They keep the machine running, but inside they're dying in slow motion. Depression doesn't always look like crying in bed. Sometimes it looks like perfect punctuality, flawless makeup, controlled calm. It wears 1,000 masks. It knows how to survive. And the longer it survives, the more it reshapes identity. Eventually, you begin to believe that this hollow version of you is the real you, that the joy you once felt was naive, that your dreams were childish, that hope is dangerous. This too is a consequence. Depression doesn't just steal your joy, it gaslights your memory of it. Now add the mind's biases to the equation. Negativity bias, that ancient survival mechanism, begins to dominate your thoughts. Your brain highlights failures, isolates flaws, erases progress. Then comes confirmation bias. You start filtering the world for evidence that your hopelessness is justified. You attract what you expect: disconnection, apathy, emptiness. Even when good things happen, anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, neutralizes the experience. You're not just sad, you've become estranged from life itself. Meanwhile, the culture around you offers solutions drenched in irony. Mindfulness apps designed to be addictive. Wellness influencers selling serenity at $19.99 a month. Pharmaceutical ads offering peace in 30 seconds of pastel visuals. You are told to fix yourself, but never to question the system that broke you. And the system It's thriving on your disconnection. Disconnected people are compliant. They consume more, they question less. They don't demand meaning, they settle for entertainment. They don't seek truth, they scroll. The more fractured you are, the easier you are to manage. So depression becomes a tool of the very machine it should indict, a symptom mistaken for the disease. You are told to treat the chemistry of your brain, but not the emptiness of your life. You're offered coping mechanisms instead of liberation. You're taught to function, not to feel, to endure, not to transform. But what does that endurance cost? Look around. We are more anxious, medicated, distracted, and disconnected than any generation before. Rates of self-harm, addiction, and suicide continue to rise. These aren't isolated tragedies, they are warning signs. They are the smoke rising from the soul of a civilization. And we haven't even touched the generational effects. Children raised in environments where emotion is suppressed, where parents wear masks of normalcy over their quiet suffering, learn early to do the same. They inherit not just genetic vulnerabilities, but emotional scripts. They learn that silence is safer than vulnerability, that disconnection is the price of adulthood, that their sadness must be hidden, not held. And so the cycle continues. This is not just a personal crisis. It's an intergenerational trauma looping itself into the fabric of our identities. And with every cycle, the question gets louder. When did we start calling soul sickness a disorder and stop asking what kind of world made it inevitable? So what are we left with? A world where people confuse sedation with healing, where numbness is misread as strength, where we measure our sanity by how well we suppress our inner life, where millions whisper, "I'm tired," instead of "I'm in pain," and no one hears the difference. But pain, when listened to, can become revelation. Depression may be a wound, but it is also a doorway. And if we dare walk through that doorway, not with shame, but with curiosity, we may begin to see the truth hiding in plain sight. That this isn't just about healing individuals. It's about confronting the conditions that made so many people feel unworthy of being fully alive. So what comes next? You've seen the mask. You've felt the weight. You've watched the world turn pain into product. But you are not just a cog in this machine. You are something ancient and powerful, something that remembers joy, craves truth, and aches to live with open eyes. And now, something inside you wants to fight back, not with rage, not with slogans, but with something far more dangerous, with awareness. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, toes curled over stone, wind clawing at your skin. Behind you, a lifetime of performing, hiding, enduring. Ahead, nothing but mist. For most of your life, you've been told that stepping off means falling, breaking, disappearing. But what if that's the lie? What if the fall is the flight? This is where rebellion begins. Not in fire or fury, but in the quiet, deliberate act of turning inward and saying, "No more. No more pretending this is enough. No more gaslighting your soul. No more worshiping numbness as strength." This is not about fixing yourself. You are not broken. This is about remembering what you were before the world convinced you to forget. Because depression, at its core, is not simply the presence of darkness. It is the absence of light you once held, but were told to put down. Rebellion is reclaiming that light, not as a flicker, but as a blaze. Let's be clear, this is not easy. Everything in modern life resists this awakening. You are surrounded by noise, by distraction, by systems designed to keep you looking outward. Rebellion requires silence. Rebellion requires facing the terrifying mirror of your own unmet needs. But there are guides. There always have been. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, not as a tyrant, but as one who transcends the hollow values of society and creates their own. Jung described the process of individuation, a descent into the unconscious to integrate the shadow to become whole. These weren't just philosophical curiosities, they were blueprints for transformation. Your depression is not a dead end, it is the trailhead. Step 1. Face the shadow. That part of you you've buried, the rage, the grief, the shame, the desires you were told were too much or not enough. It must be unearthed. You will not heal by avoiding darkness. You will only heal by honoring it. Carl Jung didn't flinch when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Step 2. Abandon the script, the one handed to you at birth. Go to school, get good grades, find a job, get married, buy a house, have kids, retire, die. Who wrote this script? Who decided this was the way to measure a life? And who profits from your obedience? Burn the script. Rewrite it with trembling hands. It's not too late. It's never too late. Step 3. Return to the body. We live from the neck up. Thought machines, analysis addicts. But healing is a full-body experience. Trauma lives in the muscles, in the fascia, in the breath. Depression numbs the body because feeling again is dangerous, but feeling again is also freedom. Walk barefoot on soil, scream into a pillow, dance without choreography, cry without apology. Let the grief rise, let the wildness return. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. Step 4. Create something, anything. Art is rebellion, expression is revolution. In a world that profits from your silence, every word you write, every brushstroke, every melody is a threat. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true. No one ever said your truth had to be beautiful. It only has to be yours. Step 5. Build your tribe. Modern society isolates you by design. Loneliness isn't a side effect, it's the architecture. Rebellion means reconnecting, not with everyone, not with the performative world, but with those rare souls who speak the same quiet, burning language as you. The healer, the poet, the broken but awake one. Find them or become them. The tribe doesn't have to be big, it only has to be real. Step 6. Reject shame. Shame is the weapon the system uses to keep you docile. You're not productive? Shame. You're too emotional? Shame. You're not normal? Shame. It's all noise. Shame thrives in secrecy. Name it. Drag it into the light. Turn to your depression and say, "I see you. I'm listening." And suddenly, it begins to lose power. Step 7. Protect your wonder. Yes, wonder. That word you haven't used since childhood. That sacred awe that once made you ask impossible questions, that made you laugh for no reason, that made rain feel like magic. Depression dulls wonder. Rebellion defends it with teeth bared. Go find it again. In nature, in books, in silence, in someone's eyes. Wonder is the opposite of despair. It is the language of the soul. Remembering it is infinite. And finally, step 8. Choose meaning every day. Not because it's easy, not because it's clear, but because choosing meaning in spite of the absurdity is the most defiant act of all. Viktor Frankl survived hell not by avoiding suffering, but by assigning it meaning. That is not delusion, that is alchemy. Turn your pain into purpose, not for others, not to be noble, but because your soul deserves a reason to rise each morning. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Your depression is sacred, not pleasant, not romantic, but sacred. It is the doorway through which your authentic self has been pounding, demanding entry. It is the rupture that precedes awakening. It is the scream before the song. You don't need to be saved. You need to remember who you are, a creature of depth, of hunger, of fire. You were not made to survive this world by shrinking. You were made to transform it by expanding. So stand there, on the edge of that cliff. Let the wind roar, let your heart pound, and then do the most rebellious thing imaginable. Leap. You thought the leap would kill you, but it didn't. It shattered something, yes, but not you. It shattered the illusion, the brittle scaffolding of all you thought you had to be. The voice that whispered, stay small, stay numb, stay safe. You leapt, and in that free fall you discovered something that no book, no pill, no well-meaning stranger could have shown you. You discovered that the abyss isn't empty, it's full of you. And suddenly, the most terrifying truth unfolds itself. Not like a weapon, but like a mirror. You were never meant to be normal. You were never supposed to blend in, to stay quiet, to measure your worth by the metrics of machines. The aching, the sadness, the heaviness, it wasn't your defect. It was your refusal to forget. It was your soul refusing to be anesthetized. You weren't broken, you were awake in a sleeping world. And that is unbearable until it becomes beautiful. Because here is the ultimate truth. Depression is not merely an illness. It is a message, a revolt, a sacred protest of the soul. Yes, it is neurochemical. Yes, it is psychological. Yes, it can be life-threatening. But strip away the surface and you'll find something deeper, a demand for authenticity in a culture addicted to illusion. You weren't born to chase happiness. You were born to seek meaning. That's what the world forgot. That's what you are remembering now. All around you, people are taught to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. That's the algorithm. That's the economy. That's the sedative. But pain, real pain, is not your enemy. Pain is the guardian of growth. It doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to awaken you. Imagine a fire. You've spent your life trying to smother it, with denial, with distraction, with duty. But the fire wasn't trying to hurt you. It was trying to burn away what was never yours, your false self, your borrowed beliefs, your inherited guilt. And now, rising from the ashes, something ancient stirs. Call it your essence, your spirit, your true self. The words don't matter. What matters is that it remembers what it came here to do, not to please, not to succeed, but to live fully, fiercely, freely. Do you feel it? That flicker beneath the ribs? That trembling recognition? That's not hope. Hope can be passive. That's remembrance. A knowing that the world lied to you, and your soul survived the lie. Depression was the messenger. You had to go into the depths to retrieve what the surface world had stolen. Your autonomy, your curiosity, your voice. You had to walk through the valley of shadows to remember that the light was never outside of you. And now, the paradox. You wouldn't trade the darkness, would you? You wouldn't erase it, even if you could. Because without it, you would still be asleep. You would still be playing dead. You would still be wearing the mask. The pain gave you your face back. This is the final, most radical truth. Healing is not becoming someone new. It's unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. The world told you, hide your pain. The truth says, reveal it. There's power there. The world told you, be productive. The truth says, be present. The world told you, fit in. The truth says, no. Stand out, even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble, stand the hell out. So what do you do now, standing here with your soul in your hands? You live, not as a ghost chasing validation, but as a flame refusing to go out. You create, not to be seen, but because expression is survival. You love, not perfectly, but vulnerably. And you let yourself be loved, not because you've earned it, but because your existence makes you worthy. You walk into rooms no longer asking, do they like me? You walk in wondering, do I feel alive here? You don't chase happiness like a dangling carrot. You cultivate meaning like a garden, understanding that some days it will bloom and other days it will wither, and both are holy. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? You start asking, what has this pain been trying to teach me? And the answer will not come all at once. It will come in fragments, in the tear that finally falls when you hear a song you loved as a child, in the laugh you didn't expect, in the moment you choose connection over comfort, in the breath you take before reacting, in the hour you spend alone and don't feel lonely. These are not small things. They are signs of resurrection. You didn't conquer depression. That's not the point. You listened to it. You let it shape you, strip you, scar you. And now it can no longer control you, because the one thing depression cannot survive is truth. And here you are, living it. So what now? Now you carry the torch. You become what you needed when you were lost. You speak so others know they're not alone. You listen so others remember their voice. You create so the world is less gray and more alive. And when the darkness returns, and yes, it may, you will not panic. You will not shame yourself. You will not ask, why is this happening again? You will welcome it like an old teacher and ask instead, what am I being asked to shed this time? This is the revolution, not a war, not a conquest, but a quiet uprising of awakened souls, those who know that depression is not a defect, but a doorway, not a weakness, but a warning, not an end, but the start of a deeper, more honest, more sacred life. So step through the world now, not as someone healed, but as someone healing, not as someone who has the answers, but as someone no longer afraid of the questions. And when someone asks you, what happened to you? You seem different, brighter, calmer, more real. You can look them in the eye, smile softly, and say, I finally stopped trying to escape my pain, and I let it bring me home.